Good afternoon, everybody. Call the meeting to order. Before we get to number 2 on the agenda, Christie, have you got a
Yes, sir.
announcement to make here?
The state part of coordinator for the East Region is available for a phone call, and I think that if we could let her go first, that'd be great, because she has a 5 o'clock obligation that she needs to get to. And so in order to facilitate that, if we could go ahead and call her, that'd be great.
Okay, Madam Clerk, before we do that, make note that there is no one here except elected officials, staff, the attorney, and no one from the public, no one in the audience. We'll proceed.
There was, just so you know, one public comment that I put on your desk, but it's online for everybody.
I had one thing from Vicki Myers that wanted to make sure that she was noted a public comment, but everybody, I assume, got a copy of that.
And it's online also.
And, all right, Ms. Christie.
Good afternoon, this is Brittany.
Hey, Brittany, it's Christy.
Hey, Christy, how are you?
Good, thank you. You are on speakerphone, and you are in the afternoon session for the special meeting for the grant. Appreciate you
Okay.
taking the time to join us. I know you have somewhere to be. And so I will lead by telling the commissioners the 2 questions specifically that you've been asked to be here to reiterate what I was saying the other night. The first question was that someone had about if the property were to be sold in the future and what the
Okay.
consequences of that would be. On Tuesday evening, I went through the convergence list and mentioned how part of first priority there is that you match the value of the land with other property at that value, which is the current market value at the time. And then they recently added something that if all avenues that was pursued and there could not be a land match of that value, that then they would look at a repayment. Could you elaborate if you concur with that, or if there's anything you want to add?
Sure, no, I mean, that covers everything as it relates to a conversion of property that is purchased with the assistance of the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. The requirement is that the land is replaced with property that is of equal or greater value, and the value being recreational value, so property that's equivalent to, in this case, what would be other waterfront property. And then the monetary portion of it is that it would have to be of equal or greater value at the time of the conversion. So say it's 10 years down the road, that it's decided to do, the property would have to be appraised as it is at that time, and then the property that will be replacing it would have to be of equal or greater monetary value as well.
Okay. And the other question that was asked that came to us was, what if it was something that was in there that you were selling food or T-shirts or ice cream? Is my understanding that other peers in North Carolina that have used grant funding do have concessions, and that the concessions have to be available to all the public. They also have to have the ability to walk out on the pier, whether they're participating in those concessions or not. It's about public use. However, if you get over into something like a restaurant category that's a full restaurant, that's a business purpose only, or like a real estate office, that those things don't count.
Sure, yes, that's correct. And there is, just to keep in mind, if you all do decide to pursue application to the grant, there is an option, being that it is such an overmatch and our maximum grant amount is the $500,000. You could remove the pier house building or a portion of the building from the park boundary. So you could pull, say, 2,000 square feet out of the building if you think that at any time in the future, the town is going to want to consider doing some of those private, commercial-based activities that you've, spoken of that are not eligible uses for our manual and administrative rules. So, but yeah, I mean, if concessions are available in there, T-shirts, ice cream, bait, tackle, things like that, that is something that is acceptable and can also be contracted out on, what we call short-term lease agreements. If you wanted to go into a MOU with someone to actually facilitate those for you and it not be done by the town, that is acceptable as well.
Those were the two things that I thought it might be nice for the commissioners to hear from somebody besides me. If they have
Okay.
questions for you before you have to dial off, then I would turn it over to them.
Commissioner,
Okay.
anybody have a question?
Yes, is the concessions, can you sell hot dogs, hamburgers, french fries, that kind of stuff?
Sure, absolutely.
Can you sell?
Yeah, we don't have anything in the grant that dictates what has to be sold or can be sold or not.
If we follow the federal and the state laws, can we sell alcohol?
Yes, we don't have anything that prohibits that.
Can we continue to use the campground area as a campground area on that property?
It can continue to be, it just has to be such that it's available for all. It can't be like, you are required to have an annual membership in order to be able to use the campsite. Everybody has to have the same opportunity to rent, reserve, and access those campsites.
First come, first served. What about our paid parking? We have the pier parking area being cleared now for paid parking. Can we continue to do that?
That is something that can be offered, yes. One of the other things to keep in mind when you get into fees and things like that, one of our main components is that if you get into anything resident, non-resident, your
No.
non-resident fees cannot be more than twice what your resident fees are.
No, they're all equal.
Okay, good, even better.
All right, any more questions?
That's my question.
Doc, you got any questions? Mr. Brown? No. Ryan Murdoch?
My question was just to make sure that the pier building itself specifically, the pier plan that we put together originally and presented the public with before the local government commission included a plan that included revenue off of 2 rental spaces inside of that building. And we just want to make sure that we can rent those out, and specifically was ice cream has been one of them, and some kind of small grill area was one, a pizza place. Of course, all that would be available to all the public. However, it would be leased to a private business. So the town wouldn't be running a pizza joint, the town wouldn't be running an ice cream shop, the town wouldn't be running a T-shirt shop. And that's basically what I wanted to clear up, was to make sure that the town did not or wouldn't be losing that revenue if we took that grant.
Sure. Yeah, and those are all, again, when you're talking concessions, those are all certainly items that can be done. Again, if you all are considering now or the possibility in the future of things like you all have mentioned, like real estate offices and things like that, then you may want to consider removing a portion of the square footage from the Cardiff boundary. And then that way you are open to do as you wish with it now and in the future. And that is something that has, been done across the state, so. It doesn't have any negative impact to the project or, future application.
Well, that was my question, and I think it's most of the board's questions, that we would not be risking, because we have to pay for this thing, and that we wouldn't be, by taking the grant, losing revenue in order to possibly accept the grant.
Sure. Well, and it's not going to impact, because, as I was saying, the $500,000 max that we have in the $3.4 million project or application total project cost for the for the acquisition, if you remove a portion of that building to allow for more flexibility in the future, it's not going to change the grant amount that you're requesting. You would still be eligible for that full 500,000.
All right, thank you.
Ms.
You're
Pat?
welcome.
Ms. Pat, you got any questions?
My questions are for the town attorney.
Say again?
What was that? I
My
couldn't hear that one.
questions are for the town attorney. I've heard the answers that are
Okay.
clear.
Mr. Hewitt, you got any questions?
I don't.
Mr. Evans, town planner? Mr. Brown?
Yes, one question, if in the future, if in the future we wanted to go and increase the size of the building, would that be possible? So I'm probably asking the lady here plus the building inspector.
Is that a question for me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I
Would-
heard building inspector, so I wasn't sure. Yes, that is certainly an option. Obviously, again, depending on what the use of the addition is going to be.
Yes.
Then.
But as long as it stays within the parameters of everything, we'd be fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, there's even opportunity to come back in the future for, a development grant through Cardiff and, add on to the building or to the site if they're recreation amenities. Say in the future you want to put a gazebo there or, have a walking loop with exercise stations or things like that, just as an example. That's something that would be eligible for funding that you could do at the site.
Okay.
And the addition could be eligible depending on what was going to be in there.
All righty. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Brittany, I know you have to get to your event here, but just to recap for when the commissioners decide to vote, and just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. If they decide to go forward the way they are, the concessions is one thing. If they decide that they want to remove the building from that, then the site plan would just need to be altered through the map person to take the building out if there's anything they can see that would not be for recreational purposes in the future. Is that about what needs to
Correct, yeah.
happen before
And I
that?
can send some examples if that's the route you decide to go. Basically, you can, one of two things. You can just alter the way the boundary goes, and it would just cut out the building. Or if it's going to be a portion of the building, you would just determine the square footage, and on that, just change that to your boundary acreage would be less that square footage.
Anyone have anything else to ask?
Mayor, can I ask?
Town attorney, yes, sir.
Brittany, my name is Rick Green. I'm the attorney for the town of Holden Beach. I want to read a portion of the site control and restriction regulations.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. I can hear you, but it sounds like you're a little
Can you hear me now?
less clear than the others were. Yes, okay, I think that's better.
Okay. So, under Part D, Part F, assisted land and facilities shall not be converted to uses that are other than public recreation without approval by the department in the following manner. And it says, number one, a grant recipient shall request approval from the department before any conversion occurs. The grant recipient shall receive public comments for a period of 30 days, so forth and so on. It says, number three, the department shall deny the request if approval would impede access to or result in a net loss of recreational opportunities for the surrounding community. So my hypothetical is, assuming the worst, that is, that the town of Holden Beach would come to the point where, in order to generate revenue, we would have to sell the property, the pier property. I'm having a hard time understanding how we could find oceanfront replacement property here in Holden Beach or really anywhere else. So when it says the department shall deny the request if approval would impede access to or result in a net loss of recreational opportunities for the surrounding community, I would think that is a distinct possibility because we just don't have much oceanfront property that we can purchase. And I'd like to have your comment on that.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with the Holden Beach area or the real estate there to speak to specifics of comps in the area. But yeah, I mean, as it would be replaced, it may not necessarily have to be specifically beach, but it would have to provide, equal water access value as the property does now.
I'm gonna try to, this is the mayor, I'm gonna try to help you on that. Holden Beach is primarily a residential island, and the oceanfront commercial zone property is very, very limited. And this is the largest piece of property properly zoned and of size that can be used for what we're talking about here. And the town attorney's point is, as of today, there is no other tract of land similar being used or potentially available. Would have to go through the process of forcibly buying out property owners, and the likelihood of getting several hundred feet of oceanfront property and rezoning it. It just really gets complicated and a public relations nightmare to even think about doing something like that. And therein lies our
Sure, well,
problem.
it sounds like a really great opportunity if it's one of the last of the kind that, this would allow for the deed restrictions to be a positive thing, to be able to maintain that for the future. But that would be,
This is Rick Green again. While I certainly agree with what you just said, if the town was in a position where it was required to sell that property in order to generate revenue, but we couldn't do it under the conversion clause because we can't find equally attractive replacement property. And it says, not to repeat myself, department shall deny the request if approval would impede access to or result in a net loss of recreational opportunities. I would dare say that the loss of that property would certainly result in a loss of recreational opportunities for the community.
right. Well, I guess that would be at the pleasure of the board to determine if the priority or the need, or if there's, a thought that in the future that the town is going to be in that type of financial situation that they would begin to sell properties. That would be.
That's not me
that would
saying
be
that I
the
think the town will be
decision
in
of
that
the
position, but
commissioners.
I just can't
speak
rule
to
that
that.
out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we highly discourage conversion. So it is a very lengthy, time-consuming, and cumbersome mitigation process. So it's certainly something that we try to exhaust all avenues before, any of our grant projects go into the conversion process. Most of the time, the conversions that we see are due to, DOT road changes, or, town halls being placed in park sites, or cell towers, things of that like. It's not often. I mean, I haven't ever seen one that involves actually selling of the property.
Well, would there be an opportunity then to, instead of conversion, to repay the amount of matching funds coming from Part F?
No, that's not one of the options that's available.
Okay.
Because it's the intent of the program itself is to provide the public land. So I don't know of any that have ever ended in just repaying the grant. And it would still, again, if it did come down to that, it wouldn't be repaying the grant amount. It would be having to pay back the current market value.
All right.
Because that's what the intent of the program is, the preservation of land for public recreation use.
That's all I have.
I do have a question, Mrs. Pakwakowski. Would that be the current value of the land, or of the land plus the improvements on it that make it a park?
It would be the full appraised. If the pier house were to stay in the boundary, then it would be the full property with the improvements on it, if they were funded with part of, yes.
And if they were not?
I don't believe that they are at that time, because it's based on what the application was, how the contract, because essentially you go under contract with the property with the state. So it's whatever you're under contract with. So in this case, it would be that whatever is acquired at the time of application.
All right, anyone else? Hearing no other comments, questions from elected officials, staff, we'd like to thank you for bearing with us and greatly appreciate your input. Christie, you got anything else?
Absolutely.
Good luck tonight.
Do what?
Good luck tonight.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Yes, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Off to T-ball.
All right, thank you very much.
She's done.
She's done? All right. We're on number 3. We'll begin the discussion as shown on item number 3 on the agenda. Who wants to speak?
Could we have the town attorney's opinion on what the bank position might be on this, since the contract, as I recall, because I specifically asked the question, had to have permission from the bank if there was going to be any type of lease or anything, and this is even beyond a lease.
I would probably prefer to town manager, he received a letter from Scott Leo, I believe, which lays out the position of Phyllis. Am I correct, Mr. Wood?
Yes, sir. Pretty much, you are correct. It's a classic second lien scenario in that the bank has to approve any secondary claim to the deed of trust. And in communications with Scott Leo, the bond attorney, and the Truist attorney, who has opined his willingness to facilitate that type of effort, gone ahead and got a waiver lien request prepared in anticipation of needing to do so for any type of grant receipt that we may acquire, this one or any of the other ones in the future.
Mr. Green, have you seen it?
The letter from Scott Leo?
Yeah, the document he just referred to.
It's here.
Does it meet with your approval?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna be very frank. We have split this community down the middle about buying the pier or not, and they're just starting to come back together with, let's see what this will become. They're willing to give it a chance. Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, never mentioned before, you're gonna give it away in perpetuity. There are a lot of people who ultimately, they have gotten themselves to a place where they feel comfortable because at least they say we've got the value of the land. Not that they're saying we want to sell the land. Nobody wants to get into real estate speculation, but it's giving them a comfort level. And they're still waiting to see what's the proposal to do with it, do with this, what's the project going to be. The best thing we can do for this community is to show them a good project that they feel confident in and that they want to keep. We don't have to do this year. We didn't tell them we were going to do this. Your public presentations did not make clear what the conditions were. Most of the people have no idea what this is about, okay? We don't have a capital improvement plan, which is a requirement. Never in my day did I mean for that paper I put together to represent anything more than this is what the board discussed that led to the conclusion that we should buy this property. That is not meant to be a capital improvement plan. In fact, Mr. Mayor, several times you have said, we don't have a plan, this is just a paper. We don't have a plan yet. So we don't have a plan yet, we don't have a capital improvement plan. I think using that paper to try to justify we have a capital improvement plan looks very weak. I don't think that it is worth trying to do this with an uninformed population, an uninformed and probably going to be rather angry population, because nowhere were we ever told that this was going to be how it progressed. We can do this next year. We can go in and we can put this in next year if that is indeed what the people, once they know what's happening, agree to do. But I think to do it right now is gonna rip everything open again, and I think it is to no purpose. It is to no real purpose. We should do what we said we were gonna do. And in fact, when you listen to the LGC, what was said at the LGC, there was no discussion whatsoever of this happening. You said there were grants available. You did not talk about conditions of grants. The town manager discussed that we have the money to do this, it's earmarked to move forward. We can probably even do it without the parking, but nowhere was there a discussion of turning this into parkland, where it would not be under the control of the town. That would have opened up a whole lot more public comment, I'm sure, at the time. I do not think we should do this year. I think we should progress the way the paper said we were going to, open it up for comment on the grant and the in perpetuity so that the whole public knows it. And if they want to do it, they think it's a good idea for $500,000, then we can go forward with blessing. But at this point in time, I'm not going to give it blessing because I don't think it was ever brought forward, it wasn't discussed, and I think it is something that our public has a right to weigh in on.
Anyone else want to speak?
I can only say that maybe your split community is rather skewed. Most of the people I talk to are very much in favor of this, the pier purchase. They're in favor of getting grant money to help pay for it. We told everybody we didn't want to raise taxes. I mentioned even at the local government commission that grants to be sought after. I believe some of my other commissioners have said the same. There's a small group that trying to find some way to keep things basically stirred up. And it is, I think the main reason is they want to have an option one of these days to sell it. And there's not gonna be any need to ever sell it. I think we can make money in it with the things that we can do with the property and still offer recreation. We have other property on this island that can be sold if we need more money. We have some across here, we have some in 800 block. There's other properties that can be sold. We're not stuck to having to sell the pier. In fact, we've already spent $133,000 of our citizens' money because of this group delaying the purchase of the pier to start with. And that's about $60 per person. So I think we need to just go, we need to come together as a board and let's go ahead and get this. This is an application for a grant. It's not for sure, but there's been a lot of work done. I think that the grant will help us assure that we won't, and this grant piggybacks other grants. I was at an economic development meeting today and there's more grants that are available. And I think we need to, I think we will go after everyone we can to make this work and give the public a place that they can go and enjoy the beach.
I'm going to read you what was in the paper that you all endorsed about grants. There are grant opportunities because in the background, I addressed it up front, and you all endorsed this. We did not promise we would take every grant. We said it must be considered all grants have conditions and requirements that have the potential to restrict the town's flexibility. It may be that accepting certain grants would not be in the best interest of the town. In the best interest of the town is in the best interest of what the people think. The people have not been given a chance to weigh in on this at all. At all. I do not see the reason to gung-ho go into this when we have next year again. And again, you want the best thing that can happen? The best thing that can happen is we do a damn good job on that pier and nobody's going to want to sell it. And we get development grants that let us do the things that we have to do, and they have 25-year stipulations, and those kinds of things are much better than an in perpetuity on the land. but I think that we need our public to be able to weigh in. And there were at least 2 other letters, emails that we received from people who didn't like this, didn't like it.
Yes,
I'd like to call the vote.
okay. We don't have a motion on the floor, I don't think, do
Do you need a motion to call the vote?
we? Yes.
I'll make a motion that we call the vote.
All right. Anybody want to help me on parliamentary procedure? I believe that the motion is not
You need to-
needed.
But you
to
need,
dis-
you
You
need
need to
to,
clarify the motion to vote to accept the grant.
Correct.
Okay, for those,
Apply for the grant.
Yes.
the motion by Mr. Brown is to approve the process of applying for the grant.
Correct.
$500,000 from the state of North Carolina. All right.
You just, don't wanna let anybody else talk.
I mean, if you want to talk, go ahead.
You
I
can
do.
still, you can
Okay,
still,
go ahead.
you can still discuss after a motion and a
Let's
second.
go ahead, you go ahead.
Hold. There's a difference between a motion for calling for the vote and making a motion, getting a second and discussion. So if you'd just like to withdraw your call
I'll
for the
withdraw.
vote and make a motion,
I'll withdraw because Brian has something to say.
but technically, we're getting technical here.
Okay, yeah,
All right,
that's right.
technically,
I understand.
let's make a motion, let's get a second, then we'll discuss it. And
I
then
make
we'll
it,
vote
I
on it.
make a motion to withdraw my motion.
You can do that, okay?
Okay.
All right, now you make your motion, you make the same motion that we just stated a minute ago. Okay, and then we're gonna get a second, and then we're gonna discuss.
Okay. I make a motion that we move forward with the application for the grant.
All right, now we're looking for a second. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
All right, so now we're discussing. Anybody want to discuss?
I heard, this is Brian Murdoch. I'm gonna say one thing to summarize my whole vision of this pier. I fought for this pier. I took a lot of heat for supporting this purchase and pushing it through. I had a lot of negativity. I had a lot of hateful emails. I had a lot of hateful comments on social media. My intention is to never, ever, ever sell this piece of property. This piece of property needs to be maintained for public use until there is no public. It's irreplaceable. I've said it from day one, and I'm saying it now. I am in full support of maintaining that stretch of oceanfront for the public from here to California and beyond to enjoy from now on. My questions were answered. Can we rent the space? Can we maintain the revenue? Because that's what we told the residents of this town that we would do. We have an obligation as this board to make sure that whatever we do with this pier property doesn't cost the taxpayers on this island one dime. That's what we said from day one. And that's what I'm saying now. The only way to do that at this point in time is we agreed we were gonna do it with paid parking. We agreed we were gonna rent out 2, possibly more retail spaces. We agreed that we were gonna put in a public access, ADA compliant for the public. We agreed that we would have an emergency access for the town. And we owe that to the public, to bring that revenue in so that property is revenue neutral. We also said that wouldn't it be great one day to rebuild the pier that's out in the ocean for everybody to enjoy? And that's where we talked about development grant opportunities and that type of thing to do that. With what I've heard, It sounds like, other than, I need a little clarification on what's the difference between a little pizza place and a grill and a restaurant, because to me, they're one and the same. I don't know what the difference is, and Mr. Smith, you said something about possibly selling alcohol and getting everybody a nice cold beer, because I tell you, a lot of the town would enjoy that.
That's why I asked.
I want to make sure, and I want clarification, almost to, in writing, that that's allowed. And I'm fine with this thing. But we've got it, you just heard it, but I didn't hear that an actual restaurant or something of that nature was allowed. I had mentioned before of a private business like a real estate office or something like that, but that's definitely not what anybody wants to see there. I think that's totally out of the question. But I just want to make sure that most of our options are kept solid for the use of that property, and that we maintain the ability to bring in that revenue so nobody is on the hook for this thing. That's my concern. That was my concern from day one. The other thing I'd like to say is, I as a commissioner would like to have a little more time to make monumental decisions like this. I just would. Everything seems to be a deadline that's tomorrow or the next day, and that I don't like. But in perpetuity, to keep that pier doesn't bother me one bit. If it's okay with the lender, the bank, Truist, and all those conditions are still intact, then I'm all for it. But those are my concerns, and I just wanted to state them. And I want to make sure that I understood all of this clearly, and I'm not misinterpreting anything, from the attorney, the town manager, somebody. And then I'll vote.
Any more discussion?
So
Anybody?
what is the wish to do with the building? Because as you said, again, everything comes at the last minute. And again, we don't have to do this now because we have through next year to do it. What is the consideration on the building? Is it the wisest thing to do to cut it out? Because this is the first time we're discussing this. Yet again, another big thing that we have no time to really consider. For a false deadline, because we have another year. I would not do it. I would put together the plan. I would get the capital improvement plan together, actually have what we're going to do with the property, and then we can sit down and say, yeah, it makes sense, no, it doesn't make sense, with time to actually consider and discuss it. And the nature of the building is the one question mark. And how our residents are going to react. Because I would actually like for once for them to have a chance to digest and to say, it's okay with us for these reasons, or we're worried about it for these reasons. I never would have approved to go forward with the financing if this had been the way it was going to play out.
Any more discussion? You ready to vote?
Do we have a motion?
We have a motion, we have a second.
And Christie, the questions that Brian asked, I asked the lady, we asked her about the restaurant and the selling of the beer. And that's what, they just call it, instead of a restaurant, they call it concession. As long as it's not a private club, we're good. That's right. So that's.
You answered that question?
Yes, sir. It's all of them.
Yeah, that was never the intention. I want to make sure that we can still rent out the spaces that was the plan, and as long as that's still the plan,
That is still a plan.
All right, you ready to vote?
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Opposed, say no.
No,
It's 4-1 with Ms. Pat. The negative vote. All right, anything else, Mr. Hewitt,
No, sir.
Mr. Attorney? All right, is there a motion with adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
uh,